It's time for another episode of the Shaun Tabatt Show, a podcast where I connect you with thought leaders from across the globe, digging into some of my favorite topics like personal development, marketing, spirituality, and pretty much any other shiny object that happens to catch my attention. Today, my special guest is my friend Derek Gilbert, and since it's currently at the front of everybody's minds, we're going to be having a conversation about coronavirus. Derek, we were supposed to talk about a book today, but alas, we've given into all of the excitement, all of the concern and culture, and we're going to have a different kind of conversation. So welcome back to the show, my friend.
Thank you, Shaun. It's an honor to be here. Yeah, this is something we've been watching for a while, and so we've been kind of staying on top of this. It helps, in my case, that I'm married to a woman with a degree in molecular biology, so I've got better understanding than I would if that weren't the case.
Well, Derek, I'm based in Illinois. You're based in Missouri, so would love to start off our conversation about hearing what are some of the things that you're seeing in your immediate area? How are people impacted? What's going on in your locale?
Well, interestingly, we just returned from lunch in our little town here in the Ozarks. We're about 45 minutes southwest of Springfield, maybe an hour northwest of Branson. And place was filled as usual, little downtown area, pretty lively. We're blessed in that the little town we're in, and the local police chief describes it as Mayberry. And said, and we like it that way. I was born and raised in Chicago, never saw myself living in a town. Actually, we don't even live in town. We're out in the country, so far out that cable television does not reach. We can't even get DSL. The phone company doesn't reach out there either. And I never saw myself living in a place with coyotes and cattle for neighbors. But that's where we are, to give you an idea. The town we're in is about 1,400 people. And just judging by what we saw at lunch today with a little crowded cafe, didn't really notice anything unless you're really looking carefully, noticing that the waitress between customers was using a spray bottle with a bleach solution to clean down the tables. Okay, so there's that. We have heard that in some of the bigger communities near us, like Springfield and some of the bedroom communities outside, like Republic, that stores like Costco, Walmart, Sam's Club are running out of certain items. Of course, we all heard that everybody's stocking up on toilet paper. All right. If you're going to be stuck in your house for 3 or 4 weeks, there's certain biological functions that need to be met, eating, and then what happens after you eat. So Sharon and I have had toilet paper on some Scribe and Save from Amazon for the last 5 years. And we always order a little more than we need. And this is the kind of thing, we do the same with rice, though, and beans and stuff. Not that we're hardcore preppers, but like I said, we live out in the country, and there might be an ice storm or some such that would keep us from getting to a Walmart or a Costco, which is a 45-minute drive for us anyway. So it's just easier for us to have it delivered. But if you do it before you need it, you're fine. Took my mother out on Sunday. So 2 days ago, as we record this, took her out for her 83rd birthday, and we went to a popular restaurant in Republic, which is a fairly sizable, it's basically connected to Springfield. So it's like an extension of Springfield, Missouri. Restaurant was pretty full. I mean, we got there at 11:30, got a table. By the time we left at 1 o'clock, there were people waiting in line to get in. So it doesn't look as though any kind of panic has set in here yet. It's just that there are some stores in the area where if you're looking for certain paper products, you might find that the shelves are a little thin. That's kind of what we're seeing here. I think people, when you get out in the country, have always tended to be a little better prepared than people who get used to living in a city. Our daughter lives in St. Louis, and we see some reports from bigger communities, bigger cities, where the panic buying at the stores has taken hold. But having been born in Chicago, raised in Chicago, I understand. You kind of get used to being able to walk down to the corner store and get what you need whenever you need it. When you move out to the country, or if you're raised in the country, you understand that ain't necessarily true. And so you tend to be a little better prepared in advance. So that's kind of what we see here. People are kind of ready for this already. The only thing that was a little interesting was seeing a note on Facebook from a friend here in our little community that the local grocery store says that they've seen people coming in from out of the area to do their shopping at our local store, which says to me that maybe the Price Chopper or Price Cutter and other stores up in Springfield may have run out of some things. Somebody got a wise idea. Hey, let's go to some of the smaller towns outside and we can find the toilet paper. But that's about what we've seen so far.
Well, and I'm based in the Champaign area. We're about 2 hours from Chicago. Here we're mandated, all large venues, restaurants, bowling alleys, movie theaters, all that stuff is shut down for the next 2 weeks. My kids actually work at Chick-fil-A, so Chick-fil-A is still open here. You can get curbside pickup or drive-through service, so restaurants that have drive-through and kind of curbside capabilities are still functioning. Grocery stores, while they are not out of stuff, I mean, they're certainly restocking things. I mean, they are fairly decimated. It kind of looks like all the pictures we're seeing on social media of just large sections of shelves empty and that sort of thing. So certainly not out of everything, but I think on a daily basis, they're going through most of the stuff that gets stocked on the shelf. Interestingly enough, our community made national news earlier in the week because the mayor put in place their power to sort of take over martial law. It was interesting to see us in the news that when you see like this sweeping authority they've given themselves, it's kind of daunting where it's like, oh, we can shut off your gas and water, limit your opportunity to buy gasoline, limit who goes in and out of the town and things like that. And so that got us some national attention. The feedback from the mayor's office and the city council is, well, this is what we've had on the books forever, so to speak, or for at least in the recent past. But I think for most of us who'd never seen that, we're all like, whoa, that's some pretty sweeping powers that you've given yourself in the face of a pending crisis. So that was kind of a surprise to all of us.
Well, and the federal government has had that kind of emergency power as well. I mean, we've been kind of following this at the national level for a long time. In fact, I wrote a novel back in 2004, which will probably update and re-release now that Sharon has gotten some traction with her series of novels, the Red Wing Saga, which you've been very gracious to publicize and promote. She's working on the 7th novel in the series now, but we published it under our own imprint, Rose Avenue Fiction. And so we've got some older novels that we will probably re-release, and I've written a couple. And one of those, written more than 15 years ago, deals with this kind of sweeping executive power at the national level, where the federal government has the power in a crisis to commandeer certain resources, including food, fuel, ammunition even, which most of us don't pay attention to because it's never been invoked at the national level. We've never seen a crisis of that level. To see it at the local level was a bit surprising, but I guess not really when you stop and you think about it. And I know the city council in Champaign issued a statement and voted to kind of ratify what the mayor had done by executive order. And I can see why the city government would want to maintain or want to have that kind of authority to cut through bureaucracy, red tape, and some might say personal freedoms guaranteed by the Constitution. But you've got a major university there in Urbana, Champaign, University of Illinois, where you've got 25,000 young people.
It gets a little murky because we've sent a lot of the students home, and with online students, whatever, but up to 50,000 students overall that somehow go to that university, whether in person or distance at this point.
Right. And, they're clustered together, and they're from all over the world. And some of them may have come into contact with this virus over a recent visit home and brought it back to the. And as I'm sure you've noticed as a parent, young people tend to think that they're bulletproof. And so they don't pay much attention to it. And we've seen stories like this coming from other parts of the world. The police in New Orleans had to send cruisers into the French Quarter to clean out Bourbon Street because people just don't want to stop partying. St. Patrick's Day parties that are continuing today as we record this because people just don't want it. Besides, I'm not old, and so it's not going to bother me even if I do catch it. Well, okay, except that happens not to be the case. Reports out of France and the Netherlands say that up to 50% of the people in intensive care units are under the age of 50. So, you young people, hey, this is not the boomer remover you were hoping for. But so you can see why the city government would want to keep a lid on things, where if things really do get to a point where people panic, that the government can step in a hurry and cut off access to liquor and ammunition and firearms and so forth. Okay, we get that. But looking at this from a biblical perspective, and this is something we talked about on a program we recorded for SkyWatch TV today. This is the kind of thing where if people allow themselves to give over to fear would allow people, would put people in a place where they would openly welcome a totalitarian government, because the government is here to protect me from my neighbors who might not be following the rules. And if they don't follow the rules, they could put me and my family, my children at risk from this deadly pandemic that spread. China is already seeing this. I've got a contact in Beijing who is a missionary there, who said that the Chinese people are essentially, are we losing some volume here? Because there we go. We got a bit of a glitchy connection here on our mixing console. Said that the Chinese people are conditioned from a young age to accept that kind of total surveillance from their government and to welcome it, especially now that the government is requiring people to scan a QR code to get into their apartment or their place of work. And they have to fill out questionnaires. You know, where have you been? Who have you come in contact with? What is your temperature today? And all of that data is tracked and archived by the government with the cooperation and assistance of the big technology companies there, like Tencent, and the social media companies like Weibo and WeChat. And if you lie, well, your social credit score might take a hit, which then means it's more difficult for you to travel or buy things. Or, in other words, you know, it's like, okay, mark in the hand or the forehead, you can't buy or sell. This is you don't even need to believe in end times Bible prophecy to see how this could be really useful to a future global government. And something like the coronavirus outbreak could be the trigger that gets people ready and willing to accept something like that.
I saw over the weekend you shared a conversation that you had with Joe Jordan, who's based in South Korea. Would love to hear some of the key things he shared with you, as he's a boots on the ground kind of guy in a location far different from what we're seeing here in the States.
Yeah, he says that, of course, in South Korea, they're like Japan, where they're packed very close together, typically live in high-rise apartments because a lot of people in a relatively small geographic area. And like in China and in Japan, because of that, they tend not to have the same concept of personal space that we Americans have. We saw that firsthand on our tour of Israel last year. You couldn't take a picture without seeing a Chinese tourist in your shot. He said that the South Koreans, once they realized that this was a real concern, changed and adjusted their behavior in a real hurry. They are giving personal space, staying away from others, not crowding around as they would typically do. They are being careful to adopt new sanitation protocols, shall we say. He said, well, the South Koreans are typically good about, the typical things that are requested during an outbreak like this, wash your hands with soap and water and all that. But they weren't as good. And this is Joe's area of expertise, is a safety professional who serves as a contractor for the U.S. military in South Korea. So he looks for things like this. The idea of cross-contamination. For example, if you're allergic to seafood and you eat in South Korea previously, you might have to be extra careful because you can ask for a dish, say chicken or beef, that's not been prepared with seafood. And they would say, oh, yeah, no problem, no problem. But they don't consider the fact that they're using the same pan, for example, that had just prepared a fish and not been washed. And now you're putting beef in it. You can't do that for somebody who's got an allergic problem. The South Koreans didn't consider that an issue. He said, now with this going on, they have changed that. So now they're getting better about this. And if these are long-term changes that are made, interestingly, this may actually help us stave off or mitigate the next disease outbreak whenever it comes. So mainly it's been an adjustment as far as their social patterns. They are getting used to not crowding together as they are normally used to do. And they're getting much better about just following basic cleanliness and sanitation protocols, hand washing, and just being aware. If you've touched a surface, you probably ought to use the hand sanitizer again, unless you know for sure that no one else has touched it.
Derek, we had been talking before we got into the interview that you and Sharon and the team at SkyWatch TV has been really following this pandemic before it was declared as such, and before we saw a whole lot in the mainstream media. And so as you look back kind of across the body of information and content that you guys have been tracking and sharing, You've kind of got a bigger picture perspective, I think, than some of us. What are some of the things that have been standing out to you guys lately?
Well, credit to Sharon on this. This is really her area of expertise. I mean, I've got a degree in econ. Her degree is in molecular biology with an emphasis on genetics. And so she's watched this very carefully for quite some time. Back in 2005, she was watching H1N1 and H5N2, avian flu outbreaks. She's got a standing search on Google for mystery disease or what have you. So she spotted this back in December when reports started filtering out of China about a mystery pneumonia. And what really stood out to her early on was the R naught value, which is the degree of infectiousness, or it's a measure of the infectiousness. It's a term most of your viewers have probably heard by now, but for those who haven't, it simply is the number of people who will be infected on average by somebody who's shedding the virus and spreading the disease. That R naught value is kind of fluctuated as the sample size, the database is grown of these cases. But on average, it seems to be more infectious than MERS and SARS, which were the previous coronavirus outbreaks, more infectious than the seasonal flu, not nearly as infectious as measles, which is, the R naught value of measles is like 16. I think on this, it's like 3.5. But the thing that really struck her about this is that the cases that we know about now, kind of 90 days into this, that you can carry this and be shedding virus for anywhere from 7 to 14 days, in some cases even longer, without showing any symptoms. And there are a number of super spreaders, and we've seen a couple of reports on this just in the last week, people who are literally infecting dozens of others without them even knowing that they're sick. It's sort of a typhoid Mary situation. You might remember that term applies to a lady, I think, who was a waitress in New Jersey, if memory serves. I could be wrong about that, but she infected a lot of people with typhoid and didn't show any symptoms. She was asymptomatic. We're seeing similar things in the Massachusetts cluster. I think 82 cases there connected to somebody who didn't even know that they were symptomatic. A number of cases in California. So that's what's really different about this. With the previous coronavirus outbreaks, similar coronavirus outbreaks, SARS and MERS, people were showing symptoms before they really were infectious. And so it was easier for the Chinese government, which is where these outbreaks were previously, to contain it. Here, we're having a difficult time containing it because people can be spreading the virus and they don't even know they're sick. So that's the thing that really stands out here. And that's what's making this one dangerous.
And in some of the circles I'm in, I work in the charismatic publishing space, and a lot of the prophetic voices right now are saying that there's relief coming when we get to Passover, which actually begins on April 8th this year. I'd be curious, are you hearing that sort of optimism or anything encouraging out of your circles, or is it more doom and gloom from the people you're talking to?
Well, we're hopefully not spreading a spirit of fear, because that's not from the Lord. We are seeing this just up front. I want to say we're seeing this as an opportunity for the church to stand up. And some of the most encouraging video that I've seen on the web about this outbreak has come out of Wuhan, which is the epicenter of this outbreak. And the underground church there coming out, wearing, the Tyvek suits with masks, but handing out masks and gospel tracts to people. Neighbors who've been vilifying them because China is officially an atheist nation, but it's also a country where veneration of the ancestors is still a very important part of their culture. And we didn't really dig deep into that in our book Veneration, but we kind of note it in passing. But Christians there are not well thought of. And our friend in Beijing says this has become more of a trend since President Xi came to power over the last 10 years, whereas the Chinese used to really appreciate Western culture, almost put it on a pedestal. Now it is I don't want to say reviled, but it is scorned. There's a sense of nationalist and ethnic pride among the Han Chinese that we Westerners are not as worthy. We're not as honorable as them. And Christianity is considered to them a Western religion, which is ironic because it comes from the Semitic cultures of the Middle East. Now, having said that, What do we see coming in the year ahead? Based on the health experts that we see, and this does not preclude divine intervention, for which we always pray, but the experts who are tracking this, epidemiologists and virologists, expect this to continue for another year, to continue on into next spring. There was a leaked briefing that was presented to senior officials of the National Health Service in the UK that said they expect this to continue until the spring of 2012, with as many as 80% of people in the UK and Ireland to contract this disease between now and then. And so what would that be? 60 million people? That would be roughly, 48 million people contracting the disease, and then about 15% of them requiring hospitalization. So we're talking about maybe 12 million people needing hospital beds in the UK. We don't have nearly that many hospital beds available here in the United States, much less in the United Kingdom. Here in the U.S., we have probably 330,000 available hospital beds. Some mathematical simulations that are following the numbers based on the data coming from places like Italy and Spain and Germany, places where we can trust the data, because there's some evidence that China has not been entirely forthright. We in the United States may run out of hospital beds by about May 10th of this year. That's just looking at the growth rate in the number of cases. And that estimate is assuming a 5% hospitalization rate. Now, again, the NHS in the UK is assuming a 15% rate. So we may run out of beds by second week of May. And a separate analysis by USA Today just a couple of days ago. So we may get to a point later this year where there are 17 people for every available hospital bed in the United States. So we're not trying to spread gloom, but we're just trying to let people know this is what's out there. Now, will the Lord intervene? We pray that he does, because that will be difficult if you're in a situation where a member of your family is one of those 17 people waiting for a bed in a hospital. And not all of these people will have this coronavirus. Some of those people may be suffering from other medical issues and just can't get a bed because all the beds are taken up by people dealing with this virus. So one of the things we've been encouraging people to do, and I know that you're very health conscious. You exercise far more than, but the best preparation that we can do, and this doesn't apply just to this situation. I mean, this should apply to our lives, because we can't serve our King effectively if we don't feel well, is to boost our immune system. And there are certain basic things that we can do. Vitamin C, yes, but get it from natural sources: oranges, lemons, limes. I mean, if you're taking ascorbic acid, that's processed. And by the way, most of that, something we've learned since this outbreak, most of that comes from China. As do most of our pharmaceuticals. Hopefully this will result in a change in that policy too. We need to start building facilities to make our own pharmaceuticals again here in the United States. Sleep, pray, and de-stress, because going sleep deprived and stressed is one of the fastest ways to knock down your immune system and make you more likely to succumb to this virus. The thing is, if 60 to 70% of us, and that's an estimate that I've seen since the early days, and that really hasn't changed, if 60 to 70% of us contract this disease, if your immune system is strong enough, it might not keep you from getting the disease, but it might keep you out of the hospital or out of needing to go to the hospital, and thus would still make you, keep you in a position where you can be of some use to your family or to your neighbors and coworkers who maybe don't know the Lord and would benefit from you sharing the hope you have in Christ Jesus, which, again, you're not as likely to do if you just can't get out of bed.
Well, I think it's an interesting time too for us here in America, where we've never faced being on the verge of martial law situations, or where forced shutdowns of basically most of the businesses we interact with throughout society. And so I feel like for a lot of us, our heads are just kind of spinning because we don't know what to do. We're all like, oh, great, I'm stuck at home and I don't know where to go. Yet when we've seen other places where things weren't kind of shut down or slowed down fast enough, the exponential rise of the virus was just off the charts crazy. And so, there are very practical reasons why we're seeing things shut down here in the States. And I feel like, it can be a difficult fence to kind of ride on between where, we know we want to be a part of doing what we have to do to stay safe and to keep other people safe. Yet there's also this want of giving into fear and be like, oh my gosh, what's happening? Are there bad things going on behind the scenes that we don't know about? And so, the one thing I would say to people is you really do need to be careful to not give into a spirit of fear and just, because it's easy to do. And I get that we're all scared. Yet we need to be stepping out in prayer and exercising our faith. And also, like you said, be pursuing measures on our own to be in good health so that we can be of assistance and help to others. Because if we're all sick and can't help each other, we're going to be in an even worse place. So don't give into a spirit of fear. That's my word of encouragement.
Amen. Amen. And again, this is really uncharted waters. I don't think we've seen anything like this since about 1918. Right. I've got some scanned copies of letters that my grandfather sent from the French theater. He was on the ground. He was a member of the motor transport company in World War I. And he closed all of these letters to my great-grandmother. I am feeling fine and in the best of health. Your loving son, Eskel. And I thought, that's kind of an odd conclusion. Usually it's like, something else, your humble servant or whatever. But, to your mother, I am feeling fine and in the best of health. Then I realized all of these letters were the fall of 1918 and the spring of 1919, when 50 million people around the world were dying because of this disease. One of the concerns today compared to 100 years ago is that the world is far more connected than it was then. If you wanted to cross the ocean back then, you had to get on a ship. And of course, a lot of Americans did because of our late entry into World War I. The good news today is that we are more interconnected, and so we can share information much more quickly and be better informed. That means, of course, being discerning, because there are a lot of things out there that are being shared that really don't have a basis in science and that may contribute to fear or to a false sense of security. And of course, there are a lot of conspiracy theories out there. Where did this virus come from? This virus isn't even real, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Bottom line is, it doesn't really matter how the virus got out. And we've got some ideas on that we shared on SkyWatch TV. But the bottom line is, it's out there in the wild now. Yes, this is real. Yes, you should be prepared to take precautions. But no, you should not be panicking. And I hope that's the message that people will take away from this. Our grandparents, our great-grandparents, they got through this in 1918 and 1919. We can get through this in 2020. But let's not get, let's just buckle down. This is something we will look back on in years gone by to tell our grandchildren, yeah, I remember back in 20 when we, and pray that all of us are around then to do it.
Well, Derek, let's not end this conversation on a completely kind of bummer of a note. You and Sharon are some of the most productive authors I know. And so take a moment, tell us about, in terms of books, what's recent, what's new for you and Sharon, and where can we connect with you to view your podcast, your TV show, and also check out your most recent books?
Okay, well, probably the hub for what we do is the website where we post our weekly Bible study, which we do on Sundays. We go through an hour, verse by verse, and we take the Bible in chronological order. We call it the Gilbert House Fellowship, but we don't actually meet. It's just Sharon and me on a Sunday morning going through an hour's worth of scripture and just trying to exegete to the best of our ability. That's at gilberthouse.org, gilberthouse.org. And from there, you can find a link to my weekly interview podcast, A View from the Bunker. For what we do at SkyWatch TV, the best place is skywatchtv.com. And that will also have links to then our weekly study on the book of Revelation, Unraveling Revelation, and our weekly program on science through a biblical lens, Sci Friday. And our most recent book, Veneration, first book that we co-authored together, deals with the veneration of the dead, which we found through the last 3-4 years of research for other projects was a central part of the worldview of the pagan nations around ancient Israel. They believed that their ancestors continued on after death, but unlike the Christian worldview, which understands that once you're gone, you're on the other side, and there's a vast gulf that separates us from them. They believed that their ancestors were still a part of their daily lives, and they had to appease them and venerate them in order to keep them happy, because you wouldn't like dead great-grandpa when he's angry. And more than that, they're kings, they're ancestral kings. The ancestors of their ruling houses were especially powerful. They had a monthly necromancy rituals where they had to venerate them and feed them and so on and so forth. We get into where that's reflected in the Bible and where the prophets and apostles made reference to those spirit entities and why they're relevant even in the end times. You know, in our future, they will still play a role. That was our most recent book. Sharon's most recent entry in the Red Wing saga is Realms of the Dead, which includes some of that research into a well-told story. We're currently working on a book under the working title, Beguiled. We stumbled onto something, a geologic feature on the Golan Heights, very close to Gilgal Rephaim. And I don't know if your viewers are familiar with it, but it's a very strange maze-like megalithic structure that is older and much larger than Stonehenge. In fact, the locals call it Israel's Stonehenge. It's not a touristy site. You kind of have to really want to get there to get there. It's only about 3 miles from the Syrian border, which is part of the reason. But there's a geologic feature very close to it that from the air looks like a giant serpent. And when we started researching it, we found out that not only does it look like a serpent, that there are more than 100 megalithic burials clustered on the back of this thing. And it's a quarter of a mile from Gilgal Rephaim. So we're like, okay. The reason we think this is so intriguing is that this place is located in the middle of the ancient kingdom of Bashan. Og of Bashan, who in the book of Deuteronomy was the first kingdom that Moses and the Israelites attacked when they were on their way to Canaan. And Bashan, in the language of the pagans around ancient Israel, literally meant place of the serpent. So we think we may have stumbled onto that, and there's a connection to the ancient chaos. Yeah, it'll sound cooler when it's in the book form than the way I'm spinning it out right here. But sadly, we had planned to get over to Israel to explore this firsthand in late April, early May, and that's not going to happen now. So we'll have to push that off. But that's the book we're working on right now.
And in terms of ETA or release date, is that late 2020, early 2021, or not sure yet?
Well, with Defender Publishing, we crank them out and turn them around pretty quick. It'll probably be sometime this summer. Wow. Having said that, I think Tom has just talked Sharon into writing a book about the coronavirus called Pale Rider. I think that there will be a book on this coronavirus outbreak and its connection to the fourth rider of the apocalypse in Revelation 6. So that may come out sooner than Beguiled. Things are fluid.
Yes, it's very dynamic when you work for a small publishing house. That's certainly true. Well, like we do with every episode, we'll have detailed links in the show notes, places where you can connect with Derek and Sharon and pick up copies of their phenomenal books. It's time to bring this episode of the Shaun Tabatt Show to a close. Many thanks for being a part of my conversation with Derek Gilbert. Once again, if you'd like to connect with Derek and Sharon, head on over to either gilberthouse.org or skywatchtv.com. And Derek, I just want to say thanks for sharing with us today. It's always an honor and a pleasure to talk with you, my friend. I appreciate you coming on the show.
I really enjoyed it, Shaun. Thanks very much.